Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you for the participants and the audience that listen at YouTube. Alhamdulillah, all praises to Allah for everything great our state. Also, we can meet together in Zoom today. Okay, today we will discuss about the topic of understanding the concept of discourse analysis in section 2. For the procedure, I, Nelly Agustina, as a moderator to lead the discussion process. And you can speak while I give you an opportunity. Okay, for the first, I wanted to introduce our participant today. The first is Zahra Mufliha Muslim, Novianti, and Annisa Rahmah. Okay, let's start our discussion today with saying Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, for the first question, why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Please explain your answer. For the first, I wanted to explain my opinion. My opinion for the first, the reason why we learn the genesis of discourse analysis that is make us to know the process of discourse analysis, especially in linguistic theories. There are 3 types for development step linguistic theories, like traditional grammar, structuralism, and functionalism. Okay, I think that's all for me. For the others, you can unmute your microphone.
Okay, I will answer the first question. Varies over time following the studies that interact with discourse analysis. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Zahra Mufliha Muslim for your opinion for number 1. Next, for the participant.
Okay, thanks for giving me this opportunity. The history of the development will therefore very according to the study in interact with discourse analysis. So the analysis of discourse in the history of its development will only be present in the general and relate to linguistic. So the conclusion is to study the origin goals to find out the development of the discourse analysis theory, which is influenced by linguistic theory itself. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you for Novianti for your good opinion. For the last participant, time is yours.
Is defined as the origin or beginning of something. Again, the question, why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Because in discourse analysis, we know what and how the beginning of the term discourse analysis. The discourse for the to time, like knowing the original of the first discourse analysis theory and the expert after it. And now really how actor and influence is language in accordance with its function. So That is the feature its meanings make it.
Okay, thank you, Annisa Rahmah, for your nice opinion. Next, the second question is, do you agree with saying that the development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistic theories? Why? Please explain the reason for your position. Okay, for me, yes, I agree that the development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistic theories. Because if we development of discourse analysis with traditional grammar base, we have to study the language of one of traditional language, for example, Bone. All of them, like sounds pattern, words, and sentence structure, have to same with the original language Bone. And the other example is Makassar language. The language form always there is the word of key. For example, dari mana ki? Or in English is where do you have been? And the other example is jangan ki begitu. In English is don't do that. So there is an example of language with fictionalism. Okay, I think that's all for me. Okay, for the others participants, time is yours.
I will answer to question one. In my opinion, the origin into the discourse analysis have always been related to various disciplines. The history of its development will therefore vary according to the study that interact with discourse analysis. So the analysis of the discourse in this history of its development will only be present in general and relate to a linguistic. So the conclusion is to study the origin of the discourse analysis. I mean that we know that universally discourse analysis is referred to as a linguistic study primarily examine the use of language by the native oral in writing, and another goals is to find out the development of this analysis theory, which is influenced by linguistic theory itself. I think.
Okay, thank you, Novianti, for your nice opinion for the first question. For the others, you can unmute your microphone.
I will answer the first one. The genesis of discourse analysis must be studied because the history of the development of discourse analysis varies over time following the studies that interact with discourse analysis. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rara. Zahra Mufliha Muslim, for your nice opinion. For the last participants, time is yours.
Okay, alright. Genesis is defined as the beginning of something. Regarding the question, why should we learn the genesis of discourse analysis? Because studying discourse analysis, we know what and how the beginning of the term discourse analysis. Then we know how the development is from time to like knowing the originator of the first discourse analysis, expert after it, and how this system exerts and influence in language in accordance with its function. So that's in different meaningless makers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Annisa Rahmah for your nice answer. Next, For the second question is, do you agree with saying that the development of discourse analysis theory is strongly influenced by the development of linguistic theories? Why? Please explain the reasons for your position. Okay. In my mind, yes, I agree. For example, um, the traditional grammar base. At there, we have to the same language of origin language. For example, language of Bone. All of them, like sound, pattern, words, and sentence structure, have the same. But if we have the position of functionalism, functionalism, we have not same with all of them. For example, in Makassar language, dari mana ki? Always there is the word of ki at the word. And the second is jangan ki begitu. In this language, there are two languages of them. The first is Makassar language, there is ki, and Indonesian language, there is jangan and begitu. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thank you. For the other participants, time shares.
I will to the second question. Yes, I agree. As before, with my opinion in question number 2, that development of discourse analysis theory is impulses by linguistic theory itself, because it can be said that linguistic theory is what give the rise to the of the analysis. So see the process of how discourse analysis appeared in linguistic study. It's seen from its three stages of the development, such as traditional grammar theory, structuralism theory, and functionalism theory. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Novianti, for your nice opinion. Next, for the other participants, time shares.
I will answer the second question. Yes, I do, because discourse analysis is very closely related to linguistic theory, where discourse analysis and linguistic theory discuss the use of language specifically. I think that's all for me.
Okay, thank you, Zahra Mufliha for your nice answer. Okay, for the last speakers, time shares.
Okay. In my opinion, yes, that's right. I agree with the statement. For reasons, because is of language, it looks side of the analysis itself. There are discussion points where the point discusses how the use of in accordance with its function. That we have previously known that pragmatic is part of linguistics. It in that there is a relationship between the two. No wonder linguistic theory is closely associated in the discussion of the development of discourse analysis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annisa Rahmah, for your nice answer for the second question. Next, we move to the third question. What do you know of traditional grammar theory? Please explain your answer to this question by referring to these things. Okay, for my answer, first is what is traditional grammar theory? In my view, That is study about traditional language that have characteristic grammar from one of the culture. The learners have to master the language in spoken or language. Next is principle of the theory. Traditional grammar have the principle that view of prescriptive and make the learners and the teachers study the language as a same with the language culture. Next is what do the teacher who adopt the principle do in teaching a language? The teacher have to the rules that curtail language as the only source in teaching the language. The learners cannot using the other language, but using the language culture was choose. Next is what the product. The products is using the same knowledge of language, like sound pattern, word, and sentence. Next is what is the main shortcoming. They are is the learners get the same knowledge and it's hard for the learners. Next is the target is considered in socially and politically. And the last is traditional grammar considered as a language art that ought to master from the learners in spoken or writing, and it's hard for all the learners. Next is what are grammar translation method? The method is grammar that using translation in speaking, and the relation is traditional grammar theory that same with the traditional grammar because they are using the same knowledge and the same language like the origin language from the culture. Okay, I think that's all from me. For the next speakers, you can unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay, I will answer for question number 3. What is traditional grammar theory? According to Smith, the theory of the traditional grammar is the study of the structure and the formation and sentence or syntax, usually without to sound and meaning. So the theory of traditional grammar is the one that is applicable in particular sentence structure theory, in my opinion. The main principle promoted by this theory is that grammar in this case traditional reflects the perspective view that one dialect or the frequency of language should be felt more quickly than another and so become the norm for all the speaker of language. And next, what teachers hold adopt principle in teaching language absolute reference that must fully study and followed by a language learner, and they are only allowed to speak according to sentence such of the source language. Next is what is the product of the theory. The grammary published 270 English grammar English theory, most powerful work on grammar in 18 country is that Lindley Murray. Next, what are the meaning drawback of this theory? Approach linguistic using the approach is not strong enough to default limit to the reference time to be constantly make the student language of the start language translate is related to traditional grammar. In my opinion, the grammatical translation method of teaching a foreign language is to read text written in the foreign language about not the spoken language. Activity in class, the translating the foreign language in one model so good translation because the score of learning study and this the relationship with the theory traditional grammar, the theory of traditional grammar inspired the breadth of the method grammatical translation language pedagogy. Many teachers conduct a class under the goddess of the method that time. Teacher had to speak for during class and record. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Novianti, for your nice answer for the question. Next, for the participants, you can unmute your microphone.
Question number traditional that introduced in the 18th and 19th centuries, which discuss the structure and formation of words and sentence. The main of traditional grammar method, traditional grammar theory is that language learners must follow the rules that have been used as a reference in language learning. Students are prohibited from using language patterns or structure that are not accordance with existing rules. In teaching, the teacher must make rules that are made as a reference in students are allowed to use language according to the language pattern that has been referenced. And in the 18th century, Lindley Murray published a book in grammar. This book contains the rules of verb usage patterns. The rules contained in this book are very helpful for students in understanding a correct English as well as standard English. The next is the drawback of this the perspective of only focus on learning the language in a limited way, which consequently makes students' language knowledge isolated by components of standard language. So it doesn't make students because it's that material. And last is the grammar translation method used is the grammar translation method, which is a method that's carried out by translating the target language text into the theory of traditional grammar that inspired the birth of the grammar translation method. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zahra Mufliha Muslim, for a nice answer for the question. Next is for the last speakers, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. In my opinion, the traditional grammar theory is the study of the structure and formation and sentence with tone and meaning. The main principle supported by the theory is that grammar should be highly valued and should be norm of all speakers of the language. About what the teacher who adopt the principle do in teaching a language, the teacher must make the rules of the language as an absolute reference in teaching the language. So what are the product of this theory? The product of this theory are rules of use of language that must be known as a person should write the emphasis standard or spelling, grammar, or syntax, or rules of what is considered to be politically correct. And well, as my friends say, the main shortcoming of this theory is that it uses a prescriptive approach. Many linguists believe that language teaching using this approach is not strong enough to develop the learner's knowledge and language skill because the focus is limited to the language being referred to, and consequently leaves students language knowledge the standard language. And the last, is such as for this method applied because it inspired by traditional grammar method. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annisa Rahmah, for your nice answer for the questions. Next, we move to the next questions. What do you know of structuralism theory? Please explain your answer to this question. First is, what is structuralism theory? And does the predecessors this is predecessors say about the structure of language? Structuralism is language study that statistically system because the link of each unit like sign and utterance and predecessors have opinion that the structure of the language is la languages or language form of sign that make utterance or parole. A sign have signified abstract idea and concept and signifier or expressing the signified like sound. Next is, what are the main principles of the theory? First is the spoken language in the first order, while in the second order is writing language. Next is structuralism have the link of each unit, so the learners using descriptive approach. Next, what is informant method and what is its relationship to the structuralism theory? Okay, structuralism theory using audiolingual method, or we can say informant method. And the relation to the structuralism theory is the informant method study about phrase and vocabulary, while structuralism study about speaking skill. So they are have the connection that to use language with the right pattern structure, we have to know the phrase and vocabulary so we can using the good speaking. Next, what are the characteristics of method? First, exercise is primarily activity. Repetition uses the language until the learners feel comfort using. And the teacher have the language as a model for the learners. Next, what is the main shortcoming? Structuralism not emphasis to the culture study in language learning, even though the culture of the search language is the essential. The last, What is error analysis and what is relation to the structuralism theory? Error analysis gives the teacher information about the error of the learners while speaking the foreign language. Okay, I think that's all from me. I give you opportunity to answer the next question.
Uh, what is the theorist structuralism and what does decisor say about structure? This theory is the theory focused on studying language as a static of the connect unit. The language or language by seeing which eventually produce a speech or speech and utterance here is the understood as something meaningful and even that has been metaceable and rich in such as way by pre-existing saying a system saying have to component and segment of abstract idea or connect concept and phrase the next what's the meaning principle of this theory? Principle is the theory as spoken language first and writing language second. Uses descriptive of the structuralism learning to learning language skill and unified system as well. Therefore, the need component to eliminate the development their skill in foreign language. Next, what is the information method and how does it relate to the information method? Is the method that uses native people as language speaker or it said to have the graduate this theory of the structuralist to language pedagogy that result in the bilingual method for language teaching. To learning with the linguistic were allowed to take part in guided comparison with the informant with this activity they gradually learn to speak in language as well to understand its basic grammar and then what are the future or the method language is what native that teachers say that many activity in the classroom learning for foreign language need to be accommodated to using language and the beginning with imitation repetition that use of the language component constantly until student feel is natural to express everything that have the learning foreign language. Next, the teacher language is model for the student to imitate. Next, what are the main drawbacks of this theory? Basically, the teaching method development based of the theory of structuralism also considered that the cultural aspect the language is important to study and consider it an integral part of the life the native language. Next, what is the error analysis and how does it relate to structuralism theory? Error analysis is to about the form of error are often made by student. The relationship is that information is considered a problem point for the student the learning foreign language in area structuralism. Error analysis begin to inspire development. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Novianti, for your next answer for the question. Next, for the participant, you can unmute your microphone.
I will answer the first question. Structuralism theory is a theory that's made to complement the existing theory. Structuralism theory of language as a static system of interconnect units. De Saussure argues that signs are one of the most important things in the of language. Words, a sign is a combination of signifying and signifier to get its meaning. Therefore, two different languages have different words to describe the same idea or concept. The principles in this theory are, first, structuralism prioritizes spoken language over a written language. Second, structuralism uses a descriptive approach that finds the language rules that people follow when communicating. Third, structuralism requires learners to learn skill, so they need a search of language component to imitate to develop their skills in a language. The informant method is a method that uses native language speakers as informants in learning vocabulary and who give a sentence to imitate. Speakers in language and use it in learning the language. The characteristics of structuralism theory. First, native benchmark learning the language. Second, learning language is done by imitating, repeating the use of language components continuously until students feel it's natural to speak in foreign language. The shortcoming in this method emphasize cultural learning because the main focus in this theory is language skill. Analysis is done to provide information to teachers about the forms of often made by students. Because students in this theory focus on language skill, errors are prone to occur. So the teacher must know the error and then correct.
Okay, thank you Zahra Mufliha Muslim for your nice answer. Next, we move to the last speakers. Time is yours.
Okay, all right. In my opinion, structuralism theory is a structure that governs rules and unifies how systems are produced by human mind. According to this, that language was formed by sight, which finally produced parole. An utterance here is then understood as any mindful event that has been made possible and governed to an extent by a pre-existing system of signs. One principle of this theory is to use informant, we can say native speaker, of the language of phrases, vocabulary, and provide sentence to imitate. Linguistics are involved in supervising the teaching and learning process. So the characteristics the first assume that language is what the narrative speaker says. Two, drilling is a primary activity in the classroom. Required habituation is a language component and repeating continuously. The teacher directs student practice, and the last teacher language becomes a mock model. This method does not place much emphasis on teaching and language speech. In fact, the culture language taught is integrated with the learn process of other components of the text. So the last about analysis. Error analysis is identifying and investigating errors using correct language pattern to prevent students from making mistakes while speaking. That error analysis was developed in the era of structuralism to provide information to teacher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annisa Rahmah, for your nice answer for the question. Next, we move to the last question. What do you know of functionalism theory? Please explain your answer to this question. First, what is functionalism theory? This is the language study with base of the social norm and cultural roles. While Chomsky said that the language is formed by the knowledge that base the abstract rules derived from innate aspect of mind and human process experience through language. Next, what are differences between Chomsky's views and Haime's about language? Chomsky said that language formed by abstract skill from the learners and match the sound and the meaning to understand certain language, while Hymes said that language skill is the knowledge of language vocabulary, form, and function. Next, what is the main principle of his theory? This theory view the language as communication system to consider of form, component, and function that ought to study from the learners as a unified knowledge. Next, what is CLT method and its relation to functionalism theory? CLT, or communication language teaching method that use the language as a forum communication media like interaction, dialogue, or others. They use the language as language forum, then language grammatical. Next, the relation is CLT and functional using the language with a base for grammatical or not base with grammatically but base for the forum. And the last is what the relationship between discourse analysis and functionalism theory. Discourse analysis is about analysis about speaking skill in contextually like article, speech, and dialogue, while functionalism is about the language study with base of the social norm and cultural rules. So they all have relationship about speaking skill based. Okay, that's my answer for the last question. Next, I give the participants the opportunity to answer the last question. Time is yours.
Okay, I will answer to the last question. Part 2. What is the theory functionalism and what does it say about language? The theory of the functionalist is new of the communicative approach that emerged as reaction to structuralism. This is mean that knowledge that underlies the speaker has grammatical rules including phonology, orthography, syntax, lexion, and semantic, as well socially appropriate situation. Chomsky said that theory of language structuralist meaning that claim language as habitual structure and that is taught by presenting stimulus and response requirement assertion. Next, what is the difference between and Hamas view language? Chomsky claimed that language is not learning by imitation and result from the learner's underlying competencies. That language content shall be defined as knowledge of grammatical rules and performance way that rules or function. Next, main principle of this theory. The principle of this theory has prompted many research to examine aspect of language function in addition to language forms. Language discourse both spoken and written to find the purpose behind the use of content users in identify the purpose of the language discourse. They can identify the language function of the sentence used by a native speaker and other social interaction. Next, what is the CLT method and its relation to functional theory? Language is one that implies one too many point, namely teaching language skill is known as to teach, such as from language, such as from grammar. Knowledge of language from must be supported by knowledge of how language function to communicate according to its and is used. In this connection, in gene of the theory of the communicative approach to language is considered the foundation on functional theory. It's see language as communication system consisting of the component of form and function that student must learning as unit of the knowledge. And next, what is the relationship between discourse analysis and functional theory? The development of the functional theory is inspired several linguists to conduct research and discourse to find social and cultural aspect behind the language used by human to communicate. The need for information or social in language teaching and motivated research and discourse as pioneer the emergent discourse analysis as discipline used to describe language in context. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Novianti, for your question for the last. Next, for the participants that will answer, time is yours.
Okay, I will answer the last question. It's studying the function performed by the use of language. The components and functions of language must also be learned by students. Chomsky said that language only by imitation and repetition based on what was spoken by native speakers. Chomsky cited that language cannot be learned solely by relying on native speakers. Meanwhile, Hermes cite otherwise, more than just grammatical competence. So relying on language speakers in learning is appropriate. The main principle in this theory is language as a communication system consisting of components of the form and function of language that must be studied by students as one of the main focus in learning language. CLT method is an approach to language teaching that emphasizes interaction as an end of learning. In functional theory, it uses a communicative approach in doing language learning. Discourse analysis serves as an inspiration for the functional theory to find social and cultural aspects behind the language used by humans to communicate. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zahra Mufliha Muslim, for your question. The last. Okay, for the last speakers, time is yours.
All right, thank you. The first one is what function Functionalism theory assumes that phonological, grammatical, and semantic structure are determined by the function it performs, that language has a variety of functions. A linguist, non-Chomsky, rejected all sort of language learning structuralism theory that claimed language as a habitual structure taught by presenting stimulus and response, reinforcement, and association. Chomsky states that sentences in human language are structured by impersonation and repetition, but result from the competence underlying learners. Meanwhile, according to Hamas, that linguistic theory needs to be seen as part of a more general theory that combines communication and culture. Main principle of this theory is a communication system, a concept and function that must be learned by learners as a unit of knowledge. What is CLT method and relation of functionalism? About this question, CLT is an approach to language teaching that emphasizes the concept of interaction. Understanding CLT has a relationship with functionalism theory. The relationship we can see when learn the concept of interaction, of course needs to understand how language is used based on function. And the last question, relation between discourse analysis and functional theory. The relationship between the theory of functionalism and discourse analysis in the theory of function fluid that language as a communication system that has a function that must be studied. To examine aspects of this function, it required discourse analysis to find the purpose I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you Annisa Rahmah for your nice answer for number 5. Okay, this is the last for our discussion today. Thank you for the participants. And the last I say, Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.